The Richardson maturity model is a model developed by Leonard Richardson. It grades, if you will, APIs by their RESTful maturity. So it's interesting to look into it, as it shows us how we can go from a simple API that doesn't really care about protocol nor standards to an API that can be considered RESTful. The first level is level 0, also named the Swamp of POX, which stands for Plain Old XML. This level states that the implementing protocol, HTTP, is used for remote interaction, but we use it just as that, and we don't use anything else from the HTTP protocol correctly. So, for example, to get some author data, you send over a POST request to some basic entry point URI, like host/my-API. And in the body, you send some XML that contains info on the data you want. You then get back the data you asked for in the response. To create an author, you send another POST request with some data in the body to that same entry point URI, and so on. In other words, you use HTTP, but only as a transport protocol. An example of this is SOAP, or other typical remote procedure call implementations. It's not a fully correct statement, but if you were building services in the past, in the .NET world a few years ago, you've probably used Windows Communication Foundation, and that would mean you've probably ended up with a level 0 API. Level 1 is named Resources. From this moment on, you're going to use multiple APIs, and each URI is mapped to a specific resource. So it extends on level 0 where there was only one URI. For example, we now have a URI to authors to get a list of authors, to authors/ID to get an author with a specific ID, and so on. However, there's still only one HTTP method used, like POST, for all interactions. So HTTP methods are not used as they should be used according to the HTTP standard. This is already one little part of the uniform interface constraint we see here. From a software design point of view, this means reducing complexity by working with different endpoints instead of one large service endpoint. Up next we have level 2, verbs. To reach a level 2 API, the correct HTTP verbs like get, post, put, patch, and so on are used as they are intended by the protocol. In the example, we see a GET request to get a list of authors and a POST request containing a resource representation in the body for creating an author. The correct status codes are also included in this level. For example, use a 200 OK after the successful GET request, a 201 created after a successful POST request, and so on. We'll cover all of them in this course. This again adds to that uniform interface constraint. From a software design point of view, we have just removed unnecessary variation. We're using the same verbs to handle the same types of situations. Lastly, level 3 is hypermedia. This means that the API supports HateOS, another part of that uniform interface constraint. A sample GET request to the authors resource would then return not only the list of authors, but also links, hypermedia, that drive application state. And from a design point of view, this means that we've introduced discoverability, self-documentation. What is important to know is that according to Roy Fielding, who coined the term REST, a level 3 API is a precondition to be able to talk about a RESTful API. So this maturity model does not mean there is such a thing as a level 1 RESTful API, a level 2 RESTful API, and a level 3 RESTful API. It means that there are APIs of 3 different levels, and only when you reach level 3, you can start talking about a RESTful API. And with that, we already covered a lot. Let's summarize what we learned.